There was a pot on the stove by 4 in the morning. Not because Big Mama couldn't sleep. She slept fine. She slept the way people sleep when their conscience is clean and their work is honest. No, that pot was on at 4 in the morning because 4 in the morning was when it needed to be on. Because a pot of beans doesn't apologize for taking time. Because dried peas don't rush for nobody. Because there were 10 people in that house who needed to eat before the day started. And she had exactly what she had, and not one thing more. And she was going to make it work. That is the story I want to tell you today. Not a story about poverty. Don't misunderstand me. This is not a story about suffering or going without or making do in some sad kind of way. This is a story about mastery, about a woman, your grandmother, your great-grandmother, the woman who ran that kitchen like a 4-star general and never once raised her voice to do it, who took what the world gave her and turned it into something that could feed a crowd, stretch $1 until it hollered, and still have enough left over to send a plate next door to Miss Clara, who lived alone and whose arthritis had been bad that week. And then, I want to tell you something else. I want to tell you about right now. About 2 people. A young couple, maybe. Or a man and his wife. Or 2 roommates, or however you're living. 2 people trying to feed themselves in this current moment, in this current economy. Going to the store every week and coming out looking confused about where the money went. 2 people who can't figure out how their grandmother fed 10 on less than what they spend on groceries for themselves. That is the mystery this video is going to solve. Hey family, I'm James, and today we are going all the way back to the kitchen where it all happened, to learn what Big Mama knew that we somehow lost along the way. 25 lessons, 25 ways she fed 10 people on practically nothing. And we're going to hold them up next to how we do things today because the comparison is something else. Now, before we go any further, if this is your first time here and these stories mean something to you, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. This channel is where we keep these memories alive every single week, and you don't want to miss what's coming. Go on and subscribe, ring that bell, and let's get into it. Now I want you to understand something before we start. We are not talking about one specific woman. We are talking about a type, a tradition, a whole generation of black women who came up in an era when nothing was handed to you, when the grocery budget was not a suggestion but a hard wall, and when feeding your family was not a matter of convenience, it was a matter of character. These women didn't have a meal kit service. They didn't have an app that delivered groceries in 20 minutes. They had a kitchen, a garden if they were lucky, whatever was on sale at the colored market on Thursday, and decades of accumulated wisdom passed down from the women who came before them. And they fed everybody, every day, without drama, without complaint, without a single conversation about how hard it was. We are going to start where they started, in the earliest years, the 1940s, maybe even before that for some of your grandmothers, when the math was the hardest, and the pantry was the leanest, and the table still had to be set. And we'll move forward from there, decade by decade, all the way up to the present. And by the time we're done, you are going to understand something that no cooking show has ever taught you, and no food blogger has ever written down. You are going to understand how she did it. Number 1. She started with dried everything. Back in those days, there was no such thing as a can of beans that cost $2.50 and contained 12 ounces of product and 8 ounces of salt water. No. Big Mama bought dried beans, dried peas, dried lentils. She bought them in pound bags that cost next to nothing at the feed store or the dry goods store, or from a man on the road who came through selling them out of a truck. And she soaked them overnight, in a pot, in cold water without any drama about it, because the soaking was just part of the process, the same way breathing is part of being alive. A pound of dried pinto beans back in 1947 might cost you a dime. That pound of dried beans, when soaked and cooked, would swell up into enough food to fill a pot big enough to feed 8 people twice. Lunch and supper. That is what a dime got you. Now you go to the grocery store today, and you pick up a can of beans, And it's easier, yes, nobody is disputing that. But the math has gone sideways. You're spending $3 for a single serving situation, and you don't even know you're doing it, because nobody taught you the other way. Big Mama knew the other way because Big Mama had to know the other way. She didn't have the luxury of convenience pricing. And what she learned in that necessity is worth more than any cooking class you could take today. Number 2. She kept a bone. This sounds simple. It is not simple. Keeping a bone is a philosophy. After every meal that involved any kind of meat, a chicken, a ham hock, a piece of neck bone, whatever she had worked into that week's cooking, Big Mama saved the bone. She kept it in a pot in the icebox, or later in the refrigerator, wrapped in whatever she had. And that bone was not garbage. That bone was the beginning of the next meal. Because when you take a bone, even a bone that looks like there's nothing left on it, and you put it in a pot of water with an onion and some salt and whatever scraps of vegetable are left from the week, and you let it go low and slow for 2 hours, what you get out of that pot is not water anymore. What you get is a stock, a broth, a liquid that is so rich and so deep in flavor that it makes everything you cook in it taste like it cost 3 times as much as it did. Big Mama's greens tasted the way they tasted because she didn't cook them in water. She cooked them in pot liquor, the liquid left over from the ham hocks she'd cooked the Sunday before. Her beans had depth because she started them in broth instead of water. Her rice, on the days she had enough broth left over, absorbed all of that flavor and became something that needed nothing added to it. Today we throw the bone in the trash. We do it without thinking about it. We buy cartons of store-bought broth that have been processed and salted and put in a box with a picture of a French countryside on it. We spend $4 on something Big Mama made for free out of what we just threw away. That is the gap. That is exactly the gap we're talking about. Number 3, everything had a job. In Big Mama's kitchen, in those years before waste became something we didn't even notice we were committing, there was no such thing as a vegetable that only served one purpose. The collard green leaf was supper. The stem, which most people throw away today, went into the pot first because it takes longer to cook and it has flavor in it. The water the collards cooked in went nowhere. That was pot liquor. That was tomorrow's cornbread liquid. That was the broth she cooked her dried beans in next time. The onion skins, not the onion itself, the papery outer skins, went into the stock pot. They give it color. They give it depth. They cost nothing, and they are almost universally thrown in the trash today. The fat that came off the pork, the chicken, anything she cooked. That fat went into a can on the back of the stove. That fat was the cooking oil. That was how you fried. You didn't go to the store and buy a 32-ounce bottle of vegetable oil every 3 weeks. The stove produced its own oil over time, and you used it, and it made your cornbread taste like it came out of a grandmother's kitchen, because it did. Today we buy pre-washed, pre-cut, pre-packaged vegetables, and we throw away 30% of the edible parts without ever knowing we've done it. We have kitchens full of products designed to solve problems that Big Mama never had, because she never created those problems in the first place. Number 4, cornbread was currency. Now hear me on this one, family, because this is important. In a household where Big Mama was feeding 10 people, cornbread was not a side dish. Cornbread was a strategy. A pan of cornbread, made in that old cast-iron skillet that had been sitting on that stove since her own mother gave it to her, was the difference between a meal that filled you up and a meal that left you still hungry an hour later. She made it from cornmeal, not the mix in the box, not the pre-sweetened northern-style stuff that's more cake than bread, from plain ground cornmeal that she bought in a cloth bag. She mixed it with buttermilk, an egg if she had one, a little fat from that can on the back of the stove, and she put it in that skillet she had already heated up in the oven so the bottom would crust the moment the batter hit it. That skillet had been seasoned by so many years of cornbread that it practically made the bread itself. And that pan of cornbread, one pan, stretched a pot of beans into a complete meal. It filled the space. It absorbed the pot liquor. It gave the children something to hold in their hand and carry out into the yard so they weren't back in the kitchen asking for more 15 minutes after they sat down. One pan of cornbread made from about 15 cents of ingredients, was the backbone of a meal that fed a family of 10. Go to a restaurant today and order cornbread as an appetizer. See what it costs you. Then go home and think about what Big Mama did with a 15-cent bag of cornmeal and that old iron skillet. Number 5. She understood the multiplying power of fat. This is something that the low-fat era of the 1980s and 1990s did tremendous damage to. The idea that fat was the enemy. That fat was something to be removed from food, reduced, replaced with something that came out of a laboratory and tasted like cardboard wrapped in a sad memory of butter. Big Mama did not get that memo, and she was right not to. Fat, real fat, the kind that came from the animals she was cooking, was the multiplying agent in her kitchen. A tablespoon of lard rendered from the pork she'd cooked on Sunday could fry enough cornbread for the whole family. The drippings left in the skillet after she cooked the chicken could go straight into the flour for the gravy, and that gravy, made from 2 tablespoons of drippings, 2 tablespoons of flour, and a cup and a half of whatever liquid she had, would go over biscuits and stretch one chicken into a meal that felt abundant. Fat carries flavor the way nothing else does. When Big Mama cooked her greens in pork fat, every leaf of those greens was absorbing richness. When she made her roux with lard, that roux was building a foundation that could support a whole pot of something. She did not waste fat. She did not buy fat. The cooking produced its own fat, and she captured it and used it, and it made everything taste like it cost money when it cost almost nothing at all. Today we pour off fat and throw it down the drain. We buy expensive oils to replace it. We wonder why our greens don't taste right. We wonder why our gravy is thin. We have cooked the flavor out of our own food, and we didn't even notice we were doing it. Now, family, let me pause right here for a moment because I want to hear from you. I know some of you watching this right now have a memory sitting right at the edge of your mind. A specific dish, a specific smell, a specific time you walked into Big Mama's kitchen, and something on that stove stopped you in your tracks. Maybe it was the beans. Maybe it was the way the cornbread smelled when the crust was setting up in that iron skillet. Maybe it was something you haven't tasted since the last time you sat at her table. I want you to drop that in the comments. Tell me what it was. Tell me what she made. Tell me what kitchen it was in, and what city you were in, and who else was at that table. I read every single comment in this community, family, and I want to hear the specific thing, not just the general memory, but the exact dish that you can still smell right now if you close your eyes. Tell me. Number 6. She planned the week on Sunday. This is where the genius really lived, and it's something we have almost completely let go of in the modern household. Big Mama planned on Sunday, not with a calendar, not with an app, in her head. Standing in the kitchen on Saturday evening or Sunday morning, she was already mapping the week. She knew that the ham she was cooking for Sunday dinner was going to be Monday's ham and rice. The bone from that ham was Tuesday's soup. The soup was going to have whatever vegetables were in the garden or left from the week. Wednesday was beans, using the ham broth. Thursday was whatever was left, stretched with more cornbread. Friday, in many black households of faith, was fish, catfish or whatever freshwater fish the men could pull out of the water or the cheapest fish at the market. Saturday was leftovers organized into something intentional, so there was nothing wasted before Sunday started the cycle again. That is not poverty thinking. That is engineering. That is a woman running a system that produced 7 days of nourishment out of a Sunday roast and a pound of dried beans and the garden out back, with no waste and no panic on any given Wednesday when the money had gotten thin. Today, 2 people go to the grocery store without a plan, and they come out with food that has no relationship to each other, that will expire at different times, that will sit in the refrigerator half-eaten and be thrown out on Thursday when they order delivery instead of cooking what they bought on Monday. The USDA estimates that American households throw away about 30% of the food they purchase. 30%. Big Mama threw away nothing, not because she was morally superior, because she had a plan and she followed it. Now, family, I want to tell you something real quick. The recipes I'm talking about today, these aren't just history, these are blueprints. And I put together something called the Soul Roots cookbook for exactly this reason. 100 forgotten Black American recipes, written out the way Big Mama would have done it. Complete, patient, with every measurement and every tip and every secret included. No shortcuts, no substitutions that lose the point. The real thing. The link is in the description and pinned in the first comment. You can also scan that code on your screen right now if you're watching on your TV. These recipes are not going to be here forever in living memory. Don't let them disappear. Number 7. She grew what she could, even in the city, even in a rented house with a landlord who wasn't particularly interested in what she did with the backyard, even with a yard the size of a parking space. Big Mama grew something. Collard greens were the most common because collard greens are practically indestructible. You plant them in early spring. They grow all the way through the first frost, and a single plant will give you leaves all season long if you harvest them correctly, taking from the outside, leaving the center to keep producing. One packet of collard seeds, which cost next to nothing, could supply a household with greens from April through November. That's 8 months of free vegetables from a 50-cent investment. Tomatoes on the porch. Okra against the fence because it grows tall and doesn't need much room. Peppers in whatever pot she had available. Sweet potatoes if there was any ground to work with, because sweet potatoes grow underground and they are generous. One slip planted in the spring will give you a whole harvest by October. Green onions in a glass of water on the windowsill, because the green onion is the one vegetable you can grow without soil, without effort, without anything except the bottom of a bunch you already bought, and a glass of water and a window with some light. This is not farming. This is not homesteading. This is a woman who understood that everything she could grow herself was $1 she did not have to spend at the store. It is that simple. And today most of us have a porch or a window or a small patch of something, and we use none of it for food, and we go to the grocery store and pay $4 for a bunch of green onions that we could be growing forever on the windowsill for free. Number 8. Meat was a flavoring, not a feature. This one is hard for some people to hear, because we have spent so long in an era of cheap, abundant meat that we have confused volume with necessity. In Big Mama's kitchen, in the 1940s and into the 1950s, meat was expensive relative to everything else. A chicken was a significant purchase. A piece of pork was an event. You didn't eat a whole chicken breast by yourself on a Tuesday because you felt like it. Meat was the thing that made the other food better, that gave the beans their depth, that made the greens rich, that transformed a pot of vegetables into something that satisfied. One ham hock, one single ham hock, could flavor a pot of beans big enough to feed 10 people. It went in at the beginning, it cooked all day, and by the time those beans were done, every single bean in that pot had absorbed something from that hock, and the hock itself was tender enough to pull apart and distribute in small pieces throughout the pot. 10 people. One hock. Everybody satisfied. Today, the average American household spends more on meat than on any other single food category. We buy it by the pound. We cook it as the centerpiece, and then we cook everything else around it. We have reversed the logic entirely. We have made meat the point when it used to be the seasoning, and the cost difference between those two philosophies is enormous. It is the difference between spending $400 a month on groceries for 2 people and wondering why the money is gone, and spending $150 and having a full pantry and a plan. Number 9. She made her own everything. Biscuits, not from a tube, not from a mix. From flour, lard, or butter, salt, and buttermilk. 5 ingredients. Biscuits that were done in 12 minutes if the oven was right, and that cost about 3 cents each. Bread. Some grandmothers baked bread every week. Cornbread was every day. But a loaf of white bread or a pan of rolls came out of the oven on Saturday for Sunday's meal. That loaf cost a fraction of what it would cost at the store, and it was made with her hands in a kitchen that smelled like something real. Preserves. In the summer, when the tomatoes were ripe and the peaches were coming in from wherever she could get them, Big Mama canned. She put up tomatoes and put up peaches and put up whatever the garden gave her in abundance. Those jars lived in the pantry, and they represented a January meal that cost nothing, made in June when the produce was cheapest and most plentiful. Canning is a skill that has nearly disappeared from the black community because we stopped needing it, or we thought we stopped needing it. The cost of produce in January and the cost of jarred preserves at the store suggests that maybe we needed it more than we knew. Butter, in some households, was churned. Vinegar, in some households, was made. These are extreme examples, but the spirit of them, the spirit of making a thing yourself rather than paying someone else to make it, was alive in every black kitchen of that era in a way it simply is not anymore. Number 10. She knew how to make something from nothing at the end of the week. By Thursday or Friday, in most households, the week's provisions were running thin. The Sunday roast was a memory. The beans were done. Whatever the garden had given early in the week had been eaten. And Big Mama looked in that pantry and in that icebox, and she did not panic, and she did not call for delivery, and she did not get in the car and go to the store. She made something. This is a skill that has a name in the culinary world. It's called larder cooking, or kitchen economy, or in French kitchens they call it cuisine de reste, cooking from what remains. In Big Mama's kitchen, it didn't have a name. It was just called Thursday. She might take the heel end of the cornbread, crumble it into a glass of buttermilk, and that was supper. Called it cornbread and milk. Children loved it. It cost nothing. She might take whatever vegetables were left and chop them together with a little onion and fry them in whatever fat remained in the can on the back of the stove and call it a hash. She might make a pot of grits, which is simply ground corn cooked in water, one of the cheapest foods that exists, and fry an egg on top if there was one, and cut that alongside whatever bread was left. None of these Thursday meals were inspirational. None of them were beautiful, but they were real food, made from real ingredients, that filled 10 people up without spending a single cent that wasn't already in the house. And that is an art that is gone now. We do not know how to make something from nothing anymore. When the refrigerator looks sparse, we spend money. We don't look harder. We don't cook what's there. We leave. Number 11. She preserved heat. This sounds strange, so let me explain it to you. In an era before modern appliances, or in households that had appliances but were careful about the cost of running them, Big Mama understood that a hot oven was not something you used for one thing and then turned off. If that oven was going to be hot, it was going to work for everything. She would put the beans in first because they needed the longest time. Then while the beans were in, the cornbread went in. Then maybe a pan of sweet potatoes, because sweet potatoes can go low and slow in a cooling oven after you've turned it off, and they will be done by the time you're ready for them. The residual heat of that oven, after she turned it off, was enough to finish things that didn't need full temperature. To warm a dish, to crisp something up, to slow cook something that could go low. She did the same thing with the stovetop. If a pot was going to be hot anyway, the pot next to it caught that ambient heat. She arranged the cooking so that the heat did double and triple duty, so the cost of the fuel was distributed across as many things as possible. We today heat up the oven to make one thing. We preheat for 20 minutes and cook for 30 and turn it off. We could have made 4 things in that same oven at the same time, and we didn't, because nobody taught us to think about cooking that way. Every time we turn that oven on for a single item, we are spending money that Big Mama would have spread across an entire day of cooking. Number 12. She used every cut of the animal. Now this one, family, some of you are going to recognize immediately. Some of you are going to make a face. Both of those reactions tell me something about your background, and that's all right. In the 1940s and 1950s, the cuts of meat that were available to most black families were not the cuts that sat in the front of the butcher case. They were the cuts that were left after everyone who had more money and more options had taken what they wanted. The feet, the ears, the tail, the stomach, the hocks, the neck, the organs, liver, kidney, heart, tripe. Now here is what I need you to understand. Big Mama did not receive these cuts as an insult. She did not look at a pig's foot and see poverty. She looked at a pig's foot and saw a meal. She saw 12 hours of simmering in a pot that would produce something gelatinous and rich and deeply flavored that she would serve with rice and hot sauce and a piece of cornbread on the side. and her family would eat until they couldn't get up from the table. Chitlins, hog maw, pig's feet, neck bones, liver. These were not the consolation prize of poverty. These were the center of a culinary tradition that produced food of remarkable depth and complexity, made from cuts that cost almost nothing because the world didn't understand their value yet. Today, those same cuts, oxtail, short rib, pork belly, are served in fine dining restaurants at $50 a portion to people who have no idea that their great-grandmother could have told them everything about how to prepare them. The world discovered the value of these cuts. Big Mama knew all along. Number 13. She cooked once, but she cooked big. Nobody in that kitchen was going to the stove 6 times a day. Nobody was making 4 separate individual meals for 4 different people, with 4 different preferences. If you sat at Big Mama's table, you ate what was on the table. You were grateful for it. You said your grace before you touched it. And you did not leave hungry. She cooked in volume. If she was making a pot of beans, it was not a small pot. It was the biggest pot she had, because the incremental cost of cooking more beans, the water, the seasoning, the time, was essentially nothing, and the return was 2 additional meals that cost her nothing extra. If she was baking for the week, not for tonight. If the oven was hot and she had the batter, she made 4 pans of cornbread, because 4 pans cost barely more than 1, and the other 3 would be there when she needed them. This is batch cooking. It is a concept that has come back around in recent years, dressed up in new terminology, and sold to people as a revolutionary idea. It is not revolutionary. It is what every grandmother who ever fed a large family on a small income understood as common sense. Cook once, eat several times. Use the heat. Use the time. Use the big pot. Let the work you do today feed you tomorrow. Today, 2 people cook a single meal for a single dinner and then look at each other and say they don't know where the grocery money goes. The grocery money goes to cooking small, cooking often, and never thinking past the meal that's in front of you. Number 14. She made gravy. Gravy is the most democratic food in the world. Gravy takes almost nothing and turns it into something. And Big Mama made it out of everything and put it on everything and fed more people with it than you would believe was possible. Sawmill gravy, that thick white gravy made from sausage drippings and flour and milk, went over biscuits in the morning and stretched a small amount of sausage into a breakfast for 10. Red-eye gravy, made from ham drippings and black coffee, which sounds wrong and tastes exactly right, went over grits and made a simple bowl of corn porridge into something with personality and depth. Brown gravy from the pan drippings of whatever roast she'd made went over everything: mashed potatoes, rice, biscuits, the meat itself. Gravy is a multiplier. It is the sauce that takes a modest plate and makes it substantial. It is the thing that made Big Mama's table look abundant even in lean weeks, because everything on that plate was swimming in something rich and flavorful that she made for almost nothing from the fat and fond left in the pan after the meat was done. Today we throw away the fond. We deglaze the pan and pour it down the sink. We buy jarred gravy that tastes like nothing in particular and costs $2.50 for a cup. Big Mama made a quart of gravy from what we throw away, and that gravy was the difference between a meal and a memory. Number 15. She understood the power of rice. Rice, in the black households of the American South, was not a side dish. It was infrastructure. A 20-pound bag of rice in 1952 cost about $1.50. That 20 pounds of dry rice, when cooked, produced 40 or more servings of food. Do that math. Do it slowly. 40 servings from $1.50. That is not even 4 cents per serving. And rice, unlike bread, unlike biscuits, unlike almost any other carbohydrate, absorbed whatever was around it. It took on the flavor of the broth it cooked in. It caught the gravy poured over it. It made the beans on top of it stretch further because there was more substance in the bowl. Big Mama served rice under everything. Under the red beans on Monday. Under the smothered pork on Tuesday. Under the chicken stew on Wednesday. She cooked it in broth when she had broth, in water when she didn't, and either way it was done, and it was right, and it filled the bowl to the rim, and nobody got up from the table still hungry. Today, two people go to the grocery store and they walk past the 20-pound bag of rice, which still costs almost nothing relative to what it gives you. And they buy a box of flavored rice packets for $3 that serves two and has enough sodium to make your ears ring. They have no idea what they walked past. They have never been taught what a 20-pound bag of rice means to a monthly grocery budget. Big Mama knew. She always knew. Number 16. She recycled bread. This is something that the French have a whole tradition around. Pain perdu, lost bread, what we call French toast today. But Big Mama didn't need the French to tell her about it. She figured it out herself because waste was not an option. Old biscuits, day-old or two-day-old, went into a pot of warm milk with a little sugar and vanilla if she had it, and they became a bread pudding. Leftover cornbread, crumbled into cold buttermilk, became the Thursday night supper described earlier. Stale bread of any kind got sliced thin and toasted in the oven until it was dry, and then it became the crumbs that went on top of a casserole or got mixed into a stuffing. Nothing bread-shaped left that kitchen without doing at least two jobs. Today we throw bread away at a staggering rate. Studies suggest that bread is the most wasted food in American households, a category that includes everything from sandwich bread to rolls to baked goods. We let it go stale. We feel vaguely guilty about it. We throw it in the trash. Big Mama would have been genuinely baffled by this. To her, stale bread was not the end. It was the beginning of something else. Number 17. She made the children work. Now this one is not just about food. This one is about how the efficiency of Big Mama's kitchen was possible in the first place. The children in that house had jobs. From the time they were old enough to stand at the counter, and that was earlier than most modern parents would consider, they had a role in the kitchen. The littlest ones snapped beans, just sat on the floor or at the edge of the table with a bowl between their knees and a pile of green beans, and they snapped them all afternoon. The older children washed and chopped and stirred. The teenagers could run the stove by themselves. This was not child labor in any exploitative sense. This was apprenticeship. This was the passing down of a skill set that was critical for survival, taught by doing, reinforced by repetition, made meaningful by the fact that the thing they were making was going to feed their family tonight. The children understood the value of what they were doing because they could smell it cooking, and they could see it on the table, and they could eat it at the end of the day. Those children grew up knowing how to cook. Not just how to follow a recipe, how to cook, how to look in a pantry and make something, how to manage a stove and a budget and a pot at the same time, how to feed people. Today, most children do not have a role in the kitchen. Cooking happens to them, not with them. And then we wonder why they grow up to be adults who spend $40 a week on takeout because they don't know how to make anything. We broke the apprenticeship. Big Mama never would have broken the apprenticeship. Number 18. She used the garden scraps. The water that the vegetables boiled in, the wilted tops of the carrots, the outer leaves of the cabbage that were too tough to eat but still had flavor, the corn cob after the kernels were cut off, because a corn cob in a pot of water makes a broth that is sweet and subtle and makes rice something special. The onion that was starting to go soft on one side, she cut the bad part off and used the rest, because the rest was still good, and the idea of throwing out food that was partially usable would have made no sense to her at all. This is the philosophy that the modern zero-waste cooking movement is trying to teach, and it is excellent that people are learning it, and every single one of those chefs and food writers and instructors on that topic would acknowledge that they learned it from people exactly like Big Mama. She did not call it zero waste. She called it common sense. She called it what you do when you are responsible for feeding 10 people, and the margin for error and the margin for waste are both the same number, and that number is 0. Number 19. She made do with one pan, the cast-iron skillet. That is what she had, and that is what she needed, and it did everything. She fried the chicken in it. She baked the cornbread in it. She made the gravy in it after the chicken came out. She scrambled the eggs in it in the morning. She sautéed the onions in it before they went into the beans. She slow-cooked things in it in the oven. She took it off the stove and put it directly on the table as a serving dish because it held heat and it was easier than transferring. That skillet, which her mother gave her, which her mother's mother had before that, was so well seasoned by decades of cooking that it was essentially non-stick without ever seeing a bottle of cooking spray. The seasoning, the layers of polymerized fat baked into the iron over years and decades of use, was better than any coating a modern pan could produce, and it would outlast any pan made today by 50 years. Today, 2 people have a kitchen full of pans. A non-stick for eggs, a stainless for searing, a sauté pan, a saucepan, a Dutch oven, a stock pot, and they are still not cooking as efficiently or as well as Big Mama cooked with her single iron skillet. We have multiplied the tools and reduced the skill, and somewhere in that trade we lost something important. Now family, you've been here with me through most of this video, and I know what that says about you. It says you understand that what we're talking about isn't just cooking. It's a record of who we were and how we survived, and how we took care of each other through decades when nobody outside our community was taking care of us. I know some of you are thinking, I'm going to call my auntie this weekend. I'm going to ask my mama how she made that. I'm going to write it down this time, I promise. Family, I've been at this long enough to know that sometimes that call doesn't happen. Sometimes the weekend comes and goes. Sometimes we run out of weekends before we run out of meaning to call. That's why I put together the Soul Roots Cookbook. 100 recipes, written out completely, the way Big Mama made them, with every tip and every secret and every technique included. Not a shortcut version, the real thing. You can keep trying to remember alone, or you can have all of it in one place, preserved the right way, starting right now. The link is in the description and pinned right at the top of the comments. Scan the code on your screen if you're on TV. I did my part. The rest is yours. Number 20. She didn't buy what she could trade. This one has almost entirely vanished from our way of life, and I think we are worse off for it. In a black neighborhood in 1955, there was a woman on every other block who was known for a particular thing. Miss Daisy on the corner canned the best tomatoes on the street. The woman 2 houses down kept chickens. Brother Simmons in the house with the big back lot had a peach tree that produced more peaches in August than any one family could possibly eat. And what happened, in a community that understood itself as a community, was that these things moved around. You brought Miss Daisy a jar of your put-up plum preserves, and she sent you home with 4 jars of tomatoes. You helped Brother Simmons pick peaches before they fell, and he gave you a bushel to take home. You gave the woman down the street the scraps from your kitchen for her chickens, and she gave you eggs on Friday. This is the informal economy of a neighborhood that had to feed itself from within, because the systems outside of it were not reliably there for them. And it was efficient. It was deeply efficient. It produced abundance out of what would have been, in any individual household, just barely enough. We do not trade food with our neighbors anymore. We do not know our neighbors well enough to know who has a peach tree. We go to the store independently, with our individual list, spending our individual money, and we come home alone. And we spend 3 times what Big Mama spent, and we feed 2 people instead of 10, and we still run out of food before the end of the month sometimes. And we don't understand why. Number 21. She seasoned in layers. This is a cooking technique that is taught in culinary schools today at considerable expense, and Big Mama taught herself out of necessity because she understood that good flavor cannot be added at the end. It has to be built. When she started a pot of beans, she put a chopped onion in at the very beginning, not at the end, not as a garnish. At the beginning, before the beans even went in, so the onion had time to cook down and release its sweetness into the fat at the bottom of the pot and build the first layer of flavor. Then the beans went in, then the hock, then the salt. Not all of it, just enough to season the water. She tasted as she went. She added more toward the end. She finished with a little something, black pepper, a bay leaf if she had one, a pinch of red pepper flakes, because she knew the last seasoning brightened everything the earlier seasoning had built. Seasoning in layers means you use less of everything. It means the food you make tastes more complex and more deep with fewer ingredients, because you are extracting the maximum flavor from what you have, rather than adding more at the end to try to rescue what you didn't build in the beginning. Big Mama was a better cook than most trained chefs. Not because she had better ingredients, she had fewer, but because she understood this principle in her hands, in her nose, without ever reading a textbook about it. Number 22. She fed the spirit as well as the body. This one is not about money. This one is about something that the efficiency of Big Mama's kitchen was in service of, and that we have perhaps lost sight of in our modern calculus about food. The table was not just about eating. The table was about gathering. Big Mama did not put all of that work into that food so that people could pick up a plate and walk to a different room. You sat at that table. You sat next to each other. You passed things. You talked. You argued sometimes gently. You checked on each other. You said your grace. And you meant it because you understood, even if you were too young to articulate it, that the food on that table had come from somewhere, from work, from care, from someone who had gotten up before you did and stayed in that kitchen longer than any of you knew. The meal was a ritual, and rituals have a cost that is not counted in dollars. The cost of that ritual was Big Mama's time, her knowledge, her physical presence in that kitchen, her love for the people sitting at that table. And the return on that investment was a family that knew each other, that checked on each other, that could not, through the simple fact of eating together every day, become strangers to one another. We spend less money on food today and more money on delivery and more money on eating separately and more time eating in front of screens instead of across from each other. And somehow we are still going broke. And somehow we are still lonely. And I think those two facts are connected in ways we don't like to look at directly. Number 23. She knew when to splurge. This might surprise you, given everything we've talked about. But Big Mama was not a miser. She was not a person who denied pleasure for the sake of the budget. She understood something more sophisticated than that. She understood the difference between unnecessary expense and meaningful investment. The everyday cooking was lean. The weekday beans and rice and cornbread and greens were made with maximum efficiency and minimum waste. That was discipline. That was the foundation. But there were moments, Sunday dinner, a birthday, Christmas, the church anniversary, a visitor coming from far away, when Big Mama went to the store and bought the good cut. The whole chicken, not just the backs and necks. The fresh green beans, not just the canned. The real vanilla extract, not the imitation. The extra half-pound of sugar so the cake could be done right. She knew that these moments of abundance, embedded in a steady practice of economy, were what made the economy sustainable. They were the reason the family didn't feel deprived. They were the proof that the discipline served a purpose. You can endure a Tuesday of beans and rice much more cheerfully when you know that Sunday dinner is going to be something worth sitting down for. The treat is what makes the ordinary possible to sustain. Today we live in an economy of constant small treats and no understanding of the baseline. We buy the expensive coffee every day, and the expensive lunch every day, and the expensive convenience every day. And there is no Sunday dinner coming that is special, because every day has been treated as if it were special, and nothing is special anymore, and the money is still gone. Number 24. She preserved the knowledge. Big Mama did not write recipes down. Almost none of them did. The recipe was in her hands. It was in the way she held the cup of cornmeal and poured it into the bowl without measuring. It was in the way she squeezed the biscuit dough to know when it was right. It was in the way she smelled the beans and knew without looking at a clock whether they needed 20 more minutes or an hour. But she did preserve the knowledge. She preserved it the only way she knew how, by making you stand next to her while she cooked, by putting your hands in the bowl with hers, by letting you roll the biscuits even when you did it wrong, because the only way to learn the right way is to do it the wrong way enough times that your hands remember. By talking while she cooked, telling you where the technique came from, who taught her, what their kitchen smelled like, what you did when you ran out of the main ingredient. The knowledge was transferred body to body, hands to hands, one generation to the next, in a kitchen on a specific afternoon, standing next to a specific woman who decided that you were old enough to learn. And then somewhere, sometime in the 1980s maybe, or the 1990s, When convenience became the highest value and nobody had time for anything, and fast food was cheaper than groceries, and the kitchen started to empty out. The transfer stopped. The hands stopped learning. The afternoons in the kitchen stopped happening. And now, here we are, a generation or two later, standing in front of a stove that our grandmothers would have run like a machine, and we don't know where to start. And these are only the ones we managed to get back. There is so much more that went with them when they went. And that's a loss that doesn't have a number. Number 25. She defined abundance differently. This is the one I want to leave you with, family. This is the one that puts everything else in context. Big Mama did not define abundance the way we define it today. She did not define it by how much she had. She defined it by how little she wasted and how many people she could feed with what was there. A table where 10 people sat down and every plate was full. That was abundance. Not because of what it cost, because of what it represented, the skill and the care and the planning and the love of the person who made it possible. The abundance was not in the grocery cart. It was in the kitchen. It was in the woman. Today, 2 people look at a full grocery cart and still feel like it's not enough. Because the abundance we're chasing is not in the food itself. It's in the feeling. And no grocery cart, no matter how full, no matter how expensive, is going to give you the feeling of sitting at a table where someone who loved you put everything she had into what was on your plate. Big Mama wasn't feeding you with money. She was feeding you with herself. And that is why the table felt full even when the budget was lean. And that is why our tables feel lean even when the budget should be enough. We have outsourced the love. We have replaced the herself with the grocery delivery service. And no amount of spending is going to close that gap. If this brought something back for you today, if you heard something in this video that connected you to a kitchen you haven't thought about in a while, or a woman you miss every single day, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe so you're here every time we do this. And drop a comment. What is the one meal your grandmother made that you have tried and tried to recreate, and it never comes out the same way? Tell me exactly what it was. Tell me what was different about hers. Tell me what you've tried and what's still missing. I read every one of them. Family. Share this one with somebody in your family who's still carrying these recipes in their head and hasn't written a single one of them down yet. Maybe a sister. Maybe a cousin. Maybe a son or daughter who loves to eat, but has never once stood at a stove and thought about where any of it came from. This might be the thing that starts that conversation. Subscribe, because next time we're going somewhere just as real as today, and I don't want you to miss it. I'll see you next time, family.